get started here. Try to stay on time. So we've done a reasonably good job so far. I'm actually a little surprised. And thank you all for your help with it. It's been fantastic that we've all been able to get you guys moving and grooving and in and out to keep us on time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Dave Kennedy, who's going to give us a two-part talk, one on the emerging cyber threats that he kind of sees in his role and responsibility. There is a big, long kind of introduction today, which I'm going to skip because I think most people here know Dave and know who he is. So I've chosen to kind of forego the big, long, impressive introduction and let him do it himself. So without further ado, Mr. Dave Kennedy is going to take us from here to the close of the day.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming out to Hudson, Ohio. We're just talking about kind of the perks of being kind of a older school type environment. Like all the people there, we're known as the techie nerd people of Hudson. So it's kind of cool. You go, hey, it's the techie nerd people. I'm like, oh, okay. Nerd's kind of cool now, right? But no, it's neat being here in this location and kind of everything that's happened. But just a little bit of myself, if you're not familiar. Dave Kennedy. I started off in the United States Marine Corps. I was in the intelligence side. I did a lot of cryptography breaking. When you saw the Saddam statue fall, I was a block and a half away from there, already cracking all the Iraqi troop movements and all that other stuff. Our battalion that I was part of was actually part of the interception initially that started the whole shock and awe that you saw on TV. So I was part of the group that helped crack a lot of the initial cryptography that was being used over in Iraq. So I spent about 5 years in there. It was about a year and a half, I think, in Iraq or so. Then I got on started the board as a junior in a small shop consulting organization. Ended up building it out over time, and then left there and became the chief security officer of Diebold. And I talked a little about the story earlier, but everything was great at Diebold. Everything was perfect. Everything was fine. I had an awesome team, but I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do in life. And some of us, are more reserved in what we want to do. I'm kind of the person that goes and trusts their gut in what they do, and I kind of just go where my gut tells me to go. And that's kind of where this all happened. And what's funny is I remember sitting in my basement. Like whenever you start a new company, I've already started my own company before, but when you start your own company, you actually have to make money, right? And that's one of the first things you need to do. I remember the first day that I started Trusted Sec. It was in the basement of my house, and I'm like, hey, I don't need a basement. We can just do everything remotely. And after I heard the twins punching each other and the screaming, and I'm on phone calls trying to get some business. Like, okay, I need a building, and I went to this tiny small room. It was like this big, basically. I started Trusted Sec there, and I remember sitting there, and I was actually talking to Dave, Simon at the time, and I happened to be thinking about like the evolution of how I was going to make Trusted Sec, and then how I was going to make binary defense, and then how I was going to start with Vision. And just kind of the progression, it's all worked, really well. So that's kind of the history behind all of this starting and working with Mike and Ryan and all those guys to build what we have today here today. So it's been fun. But I'm on TV a lot, Fox and CNN and Congress and all that other stuff. I was recently one of the big figureheads or voices around the Apple debate. When the Apple stuff came out in the encryption, I was one of the first people to come out and say, hey, this is not just about one phone, it's about multiple phones. What was interesting is when I did the very first interview on this topic, and there was a poll that they had, and it was like 98% agreed with the government trying to get to this phone because everybody was led to believe or was told that it was, hey, it's just one phone, it's just one phone you need to worry about. And I was like this little tiny voice in the back saying, hey, I don't think it's just about one phone, this sets precedence and all this other stuff. And I'm not a lawyer, but I have to imagine that they have a laundry list of other things out there. And what was interesting is I went on Judge Janine. And I don't know if anybody saw the interview, but it was one of the worst ones that I've ever been on my entire life. Like, I can handle Congress, I couldn't handle that. I'm very tempered when I do those, but I was on with Judge Janine, and Judge Janine, the producer, was like, hey, we're going to have another person on the interview with you. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I get on, and it's I have polar opposite views of mine. Hey, we should allow them into the phone. It's just one time type of thing, and that's fine. They also had the families of the San Bernardino victims, lawyer represented there, and then Judge Janine was against me. So it was 3 versus 1. And I remember getting yelled at by Judge Janine saying I'm basically an idiot because it's just one phone. Then like 3 days later, it came out that it wasn't just one phone, it was a lot more other issues, and I never got an apology, unfortunately. But the best part about it is she's like, why can't Apple help them out? And I'm like, they did. They gave them access to be able to get into it, but they changed the iCloud password in the cloud, which caused the whole thing not to sync. And she's like, well, that's not true. I'm like, I read that on your Fox News website. It's on the main page right now. I don't understand why it doesn't. Anyway, so The media is always an interesting one. I've been introduced as an Iranian nuclear expert before. Talk about sweating in places you've never sweat before. And it's one of those ones where you're like, I need to BS my way out of here. You know, you can't just be like, well, hey, I'm not an Iranian nuclear expert. You can't just walk off. So you're like, yeah, but that cyber stuff is pretty crazy. But you know, today's talk is really talking about emerging threats and what we see today. And a lot of what you're going to see today are things that I think a lot of us know, are things that we deal with on a regular basis. But interesting enough, when I decided to build Vision, which is what I'm going to show you in a little bit, it was actually from a concept that I came up with 5 years ago, I think over, 5 years ago. And it's something that is so needed today in what we actually find. And it's interesting because the markets, what we're seeing out there from a industry perspective is that there's new technology, new software coming out every single day. And usually these companies are backed by heavy VC and they're on like, you know, Series 3 funding or Series C funding, whatever that is. So, you know, they get more and more and more money because they're not profitable companies. I decided to take an exact opposite approach and just working with folks that I knew and I trusted and build it the right way and not have to worry about it. But that's not just a technology problem, it's a lot of other things. So today's talk is really focusing on what we're seeing as far as how the breaches are happening, what is out there today that is happening and how they're doing it, and also what you can do to get better at what's actually happening. And so if you look at day-to-day life, and it's funny because, you know, I'm the type of person that makes my slides like usually the night before. That's actually like being proactive. I usually do it like a couple hours before. But I sent all these slides out to everybody and I changed them all around. So sorry, Mike, I changed all the slides. He's cool. It's funny.
It's different.
Well, it's funny. So whenever you start a company with your friends, you know, it's all about, it's like basically a marriage. And you know, so it's funny because we all have our different quirks, and I'm like the anti-meeting person. Mike is the meeting person, right? And so he's like, Dave, I need 30 minutes, which really is an hour. But he's like, I need 30 minutes, I need it. I'm like, all right, you know, it's fine. So we all work together in a very good way, but we all balance each other out. But this one I change all the time because it's how I feel in my mood. But you know, if you look at what we're facing today and the day-to-day activities that we focus on, I like to put in perspective around what the threats are, what we deal with on a regular basis, and ultimately how do we go and tackle it. So there's a good statistic on this. This source came from E&Y. There was a survey that they did to their customers on you know, what threats or challenges are the greatest concern from you. And largely enough, sophisticated attackers targeted a organization, phishing, social network exploits, or other forms of social engineering, and accidental data leaks by end users who fail to follow security policies. So those are the three predominant, or at least the two predominant ones that are out there. So the biggest threats that we face, you know, are sophisticated attacks, right? That's number one. If a hacker that's really good penetrates our network and then, you know, takes all of our data and we don't detect it, that's a major problem, right? And the second one is the phishing pieces around our end users, you know, people falling victim to certain areas. Now what's interesting is if you look at this statistic that EOI came out with, and you know, they obviously do work globally, they do work with the largest companies in the world, they're, you know, one of the big five when it comes to that. You get the two there. What do we actually spend our time on is the biggest question. So if our two biggest problems are sophisticated attackers and social engineering and phishing, what do we spend most of our time on? And predominantly, the most we spend our time on is security vulnerabilities introduced by our own application development team. You know, security vulnerabilities introduced through the purchase of off-the-shelf software, internal mistakes or external attacks. The largest one was phishing, social network exploits, and other forms of social engineering. And we actually drilled down to the data behind that. It's responding to commoditized phishing emails like ransomware, right? So most of our day-to-day activities is focused on fighting fires, right? That's what we've become as kind of firefighters in most organizations. And in a lot of cases, some companies, you know, have 500 people or 2,000 people dedicated to security, and other people wear multiple hats. We're IT, we're security, we're somebody else. So you have different spectrums, but it's consistently the same. Now the thing of it is that when you look at this, this statistic, we're not focusing necessarily on the right things that are out there. And interesting enough, we are getting better at visibility in certain areas. Like we know that we need to invest in things like SIMs and technology and things that at least allow us to gain better visibility. But at the same time, whenever we introduce new things, it introduces complexity. And in most cases, if you look at a lot of the technology we have today, like whether it's next-gen firewalls or whatever it ends up being, in most cases, those introduce significant complexity to your environments that you may not already be dealing with. Like just as an example, I always like to use this example where you use Cisco for the past 10 years and you have these awesome Cisco engineers, right? But you've done things wrong in the past, you want to go to next gen, you want to go to the latest, greatest firewalls. Well, now you go to a Palo Alto, which is fantastic, they're great firewalls, right? But you just take and import all of your 10 years of horribleness into, a brand new piece of technology, and you use the little importer tool. They actually have an importer tool for these devices, right? But now you're next gen, and that's supposed to protect you against attacks. And the problem now is you have 10 years of institutional knowledge around Cisco, and now you have to relearn a new piece of technology which introduces complexity. And then you throw buzzwords in like, DLP and all these other things. It introduces a lot of different complexities that you're not, staffed to handle in a lot of cases. And so if you look at a lot of the different breaches that are out there, so the way that trusted SEC and binary defense are structured is we have IR teams that actively work with customers when they experience breaches. And so what we did is we did a triage of the different incidents that we saw between the two companies. So there's 127 different breaches that we've done investigations for the past 2 years. And so 82% of the compromises occurred directly from the endpoints themselves. So a large percentage came from endpoints. So the end users as being the initial vector of attack for most. 14% came from perimeter compromise. And a lot of those came from CMSs, content management systems, like WordPress, and those is kind of the initial entry point into most organizations. Marketing sets up a brand new website that's spiffy, but it has all these security flaws in them. And then 4% employee error. This one was an interesting statistic. So compromising happening from like a third party, but they use the same password in their corporate infrastructure. So that was an interesting one to kind of see as far as a statistic as well. But interesting enough, you can definitely see the largest trend and percentage happening at the endpoints themselves. And so recently, and I don't necessarily like referencing the Verizon data breach report, there's a lot of bias that goes into that report because they basically go to different organizations and they influx that information. They can't validate a lot of it. But it is a good central source for kind of trends and things that are happening. And interesting enough, phishing remains a data breach weapon of choice, says Verizon. And they said that with Verizon, that it took usually minutes, not days, to get access into organizations through this specific technique. So phishing by far, number one, easiest way, low investment, high return when it comes to what you actually have to do. So here's an actual report from them, the Verizon data breach report. 67% took days, the rest took minutes. So 21% minutes, sorry, 67% days. And so it's interesting to see that because in a lot of cases when it comes to attacks, and that's the top part is the compromise. The compromise took minutes, and then the actual exfiltration of data took days. So in order for me from point A to compromise an organization takes minutes. In order for me to get access to the data that I need access to took days. That's a good statistic to understand. Anthem they didn't detect for 6 months, right? A lot of the different ones that you saw didn't happen 6 months or a year later. They're already gone. They already have all the data. They've already exfiltrated. You have at this point in time a few days to detect, or else your data's gone and that's it. You've now exhibited a breach. What that does show, though, which is really interesting, is that now you have a day to a compromise, and you have a few minutes to a compromise, which is really difficult to detect. But that movement in your network, you can attack that as it's happening in real time. You can stop it breaching that day period or multiple day period of it actually happening. So let's talk a little about how endpoint compromises work. I think it's important to understand the different techniques that you have out there and the way that attackers actively go after systems. And the reason I like to show this out here is because understanding how attackers go after your endpoints, go after your systems are the main reason why we have the downfalls of Company C. And that's an important problem because it's not just a technology solution, it's also a people solution. You have to change culture. You have to have a program in place that understands and teaches people the protections of those. So it's not just a technology thing. And so the first thing that I do as an attacker is I do my homework. I look at who I'm going to attack. Now, there's different variations based off of the attacker mindset. Like, for example, if I'm just a commoditized ransomware collective, then I'm sending bulk heists out to a number of companies hoping that I have a certain percentage rate. And then if I really want to get a good buck, I'll maybe spend a day or two customizing something for a company. Then I have a higher percentage or chance of getting access to that from a ransomware perspective. Just depends on that. Now, has anybody actually been impacted by ransomware before?
Yeah.
Couple, yeah? What's interesting is, has anybody got one where they actually have a phone number you can call?
Yeah.
They are so polite. Like you call the ransomware folks, they have better customer service than Time Warner Cable. There's no hold time. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's funny, I just actually had a Time Warner issue literally this last weekend. And I call them up, like, we're improving our process so you don't have any, longer hold times. So I'm like, hey, can I call the ransomware people to have them fix my cable modem? but the ransomware people are actually like really nice and pleasant. Like, yes, sir, I understand that we're taking your computer hostage and this is illegal, but you still need to pay the Bitcoin. I can help you with that. Can't help you with anything else. You still need to pay the 5 Bitcoin or the $500 or whatever it ends up being, right? But I really can't help you unless you pay the money. And they're very responsive. It's a business for them, right? But that is one market. So that's the ransomware market, right? You also have the organized crime units that are mostly focused on, potentially, intellectual property, ways of getting access to cardholder data, ways of getting access to PII or PHI. It was interesting when we had the panel debate earlier about the medical market. There's also another mandate that came from the federal government around ensuring that organizations that have PHI data, patient healthcare information, move to ePHI, electronic patient healthcare information. Now, the state of security in hospitals are, and I mentioned this before, are literally and almost usually 10 years behind anybody else in the industry. And so now you have paper records that me as a hacker I have no access to. Now you're taking these thousands and hundreds of thousands of paper records and moving them to a database where they have no security or protection around them and hoping that it works well. And that's where you saw a lot of these big breaches happening because the medical facilities, institutions have no security when it comes to what they're doing. And believe me, I've seen the worst of the worst as you can possibly imagine. Like when I go to bed sometimes and I get out like, man, when I got my heart surgery, I really hope that they're not like what I just experienced there. That's terrible, right? But it is. And a lot of these people that actually make, devices, again, talking about IoT, they have Bluetooth integration. The Bluetooth integration goes to a mobile app, and that mobile app can issue direct commands to that piece of device that's in your body. I'm like, that's so messed up. You don't ever want that. It's so wrong. Well, it's a marketing thing. We can't change it now. I'm like, no. But anyways. But the first thing I do as an attacker, going back to this case here and the creativity around it, is I have to build a fantasy that you believe. Right? And that's what I'm doing. I'm marketing you something that you need to do, an action that you need to take in order for you to do something on behalf of me, right? So when I go and I do something, if I'm doing a very crafted attack, more of a targeted attack against your infrastructure, I'm going to build a complete fantasy around you. I'm going to do social media. I'm going to look at your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn profiles for me are the best. I use them all the time when I'm going after organizations. And so I build that, and I start to build what we call our pretext or our attack. Our pretext is our fantasy that we're going to con you into doing. Whether I'm trying to impersonate HR or I'm trying to impersonate a question that maybe your role is sales, and I'm trying to be a business that wants to buy services from you. I'm going to build something that is your function in order for me to actively go and do your job in life, and I'm going to take advantage of that. And the thing that's so alarming about this method is it takes advantage, and it's not going to be fixed. And as far as I know, until when I'm dead, it still won't be fixed. Right? This is how we are designed to operate as human beings. We are designed in our companies to perform certain functions, whether that's information security, whether that's HR, whether that's sales, as I mentioned before, marketing, whatever. We all have different roles and responsibilities that we do. The good story that I was leveraging is I remember when I first was targeting an organization. This was like 2 years ago. I was targeting an organization, and they had just celebrated their 50 years of being in business, right? It was all over their website and everything else. And I contacted their PR person. You can tell who the PR person is because every single blog they had that person's name on it, right? And so I contacted the business person. I said, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I registered a website from businesswirednews.com or something like that, right? And I made a fake website that I cloned from another website. It looked really nice. It was kind of sticky. But then, I sent an email out to them, and so they checked this out or whatever, and literally almost instantly as soon as I sent an email, I got an email back from this person, right? Oh, we'd love to comment on our 50-year anniversary and all the stuff that we're doing, and all this good stuff, right? Who wouldn't? That's their role, they're a function of this PR. So what I did is I took that person's email that they sent to me, and I grabbed, what's great about that email that they sent to me is it looks believable now, because now I know what font they use for their emails, the disclaimer at the bottom, the logos that they use in their email, the exact format that I would use if I want to phish people. And then what I did is I sent an email out to these individuals in the company originating from this person's email address saying, hey, we're so happy about our 50th year anniversary, we're giving away 50 iPhones for the first 50 employees. And I got more hits. I only sent it to 10 people. I had like 300 responses. And people were forwarding each other like, hey, did you get this? They're still getting them out, you know? It was insane. Like, my servers couldn't even handle it. There's a shell. Here's their creds. Here's their passwords. You know, like, yeah, let's start messing with them and getting enemies. So, you know, but that is a good example of taking people's information and their roles and functions, taking a piece over here and using it over here. So they'll actively use that as their main method of attack. And once they attack, they follow a pretty specific methodology. And you know, the type of method that we use is very specific, and it's universal across the board when it comes to hackers. There's no secret sauce that we use, whether it's a 0-day or this tool or that tool. It's very abnormal traffic. It's very abnormal behavior that's going on in your environment when this actually occurs. And so the first thing we do, you know, and I talked about this before, but defining your target, who I'm going after. After that, we do our reconnaissance, our intel gathering, looking at LinkedIn or other things. And then from there, we build or buy a tool. If I want to buy a tool that does this for me, that can hack a computer for me, I go and I spend 50 to 500 bucks on an exploit kit to do it for me. I don't have to be technically savvy to build exploits and things like that. I can be a script kiddie, and the guys that are awesome that are running these exploits sell it to me for a price, right? So now I buy the tool. There's a whole market on that too. The exploit kit stuff, the EK market is just booming hot right now. Because there's not a lot of the super technical folks, and there's a lot of the folks that are trying to get it, right? And it's the same thing that happened with ransomware. Most of the people that write the ransomware code aren't the people sending the emails out to compromise. It's a licensing model. So hey, I license you my ransomware that doesn't get detected by antivirus, it doesn't get detected by anything else. You buy it from me, and I get a percentage of the money that you get. And you know, if I find that you're cheating out, I'll cut your supplies off. You no longer have access to my updates, my software, the latest crypto that's out there now, or ways of fixing things that they got around. So it's a whole market based off of that. And so once I do that, I build my attack profile of what I'm going after, test for the detection of what they have. You know, do they have things like, you know, application firewalls, or things, or you know, virtualization or containment software, things that might actually stop me. These are all some of the main things that we focus on. And then from there, we go and we actually attack. And once we attack, we deploy our malware or whatever we end up doing, and that becomes our initial intrusion. So now we have one machine or multiple machines or usernames and passwords to an organization. Now why that one machine is super important is because now that one machine is sitting behind the firewall. It's sitting, you know, it has access to all of your systems, it has access to your intranet, to everything else. What you might also not know too, or maybe do, is that your machine has a significant amount of information on that I need as an attacker. It has admin passwords, it has hashes, but it has direct access to Active Directory. I can query things now and say, well, hey, who's your administrators? Well, it's Bob and so-and-so. Now I'm going to go to Bob's machine. I'm going to check out there for a little bit and see what's going on in Bob's machine. If I can use Bob's machine to get over to a server. Now, if I got access to a server, I need to move to this server to get access to the type of data that I want to get access to. And that's what takes days, right? I have to hawk a bunch of information called hawking. We call it distrust called hawking. We have a bunch of weird hawker pictures with hawks. Anyways, it's a long story. But we have these things where we go and we look for different systems that we go after until we get access to the data that we need. And once we have access to the data we need, we exfiltrate that, we take that out of the company, and then boom, you know, now we did our heist. Now we got the information that we need access to. And so one of the things that we also focus on is what we call persistence hooks. We want to stay and maintain access to this organization. What happens if a sysadmin or a IT security person detects that we're there? They shut us down from our initial Bob's computer that we compromised. Bob, I'm picking on you, right, Bob? Oh, Bob, hey, Bob. Yeah, I always pick on sales anyway. Like, I actually, when I hack companies, I always go after sales because they will do anything you want them to do ever. Like, hey, I'm going to hack your computer. Well, am I still going to get a sale? Like, you haven't done that before, Bob. So we go for the persistence hooks, and once we get the persistence hooks in there, you know, say Bob's computer gets quarantined to move on because there's an infection that was detected or compromised or whatnot. But I have other hooks now into other people's systems. You know, I have access to 5 other systems and 4 servers, and I want to make sure that I can maintain what we call our command and control infrastructure. So I want to show you an actual example of this. This is when I was on CNN recently. They did a story on us. I'm actually doing, I don't know if I can talk about that. Well, whatever. Anyways, I'll make sure I cut this out of the video. But I'm also doing a story now with National Geographic. And is anybody seen the show Mr. Robot? Yeah, a few people seen the show Mr. Robot. If you get a chance to check it out, it's pretty cool. It's on USA. I do a lot of the technical skits now for them. So they actually use my tool in episode 5. They're actually hacking in using the Social Engineer Toolkit, which is a tool that I wrote. And then they called me afterwards, like, hey, we really like your toolkit. Is there any way that you can write this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, anytime you want, seriously. Like, so like a lot of their stuff now, the season 2 stuff I'm working on with them. I got to talk to the guy that plays Elliot, but the guy that's more famous, Christian Slater. I talked to Christian Slater. The biggest thing that, so Christian Slater plays this like awesome hacker along with this guy Elliot. If you talk to those guys, they're like terribly paranoid hackers. Like they play like listen, dude, can you provide some protection for us against these hackers? I've got a lot of weird stuff going on right now. So like, listen, man, you're on your own. It's like, but the next, it was pretty cool. Like when the Ashley Madison stuff happened, they were actually filming. They filmed very quickly. So like, what will happen is like, say Ashley Madison comes out this week. They'll actually be filming next week, and they'll try to incorporate relevant things that are happening in the media around hacking into it to keep that story going. What they wanted me to do was actually do a skit on the Ashley Madison thing. Like Elliot actually hacked into it, so I wrote all this code that was extracted from the Ashley Madison database, and it was actually him doing the whole thing. It was cool. They didn't end up using it because they didn't have enough time to prep it, but those are the types of cool things you get to see. But this is one we did on CNN, and they did a whole story series on hackers. And so I just wanted to show you these. It's kind of cool.
Say the word hacker. Some creepy dude in a basement? Well, that's a misconception. What if I told you there's a class of hackers who don't just have social skills, they have more social intelligence than anyone you'll ever meet? David Kennedy is one of them. He's what's known as a social engineer, or a people hacker. His craft is to dupe you into doing things and sharing information you probably shouldn't.
Can I just get your credit card number?
No, it's funny. The credit card number one, they cut this part off. It's going to be airing as a second series. So the person that did this is her name is Lori Siegel, phenomenal reporter. She's like the differences in news organizations is stunning because like they'll actually like CNN actually has people that try to interview multiple people to get what the story is, and other people just bring in folks off the street to comment on it. And so with CNN specifically, Lori's like, hey, I want you to do a really funny prank on my boss. I'm like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? She's like, I don't know, whatever you want to do. I'm like, well, how about like getting his like social security number and his credit card and all this other stuff? I'm like, I can go after his family too. She's like, no, that's too much. I'm like, okay. So getting somebody's social security number is the easiest. I can just, as long as I know your first name, your last name, and then the general location you're in, I can pull a database that has your social security number. That's the easiest part, okay? What I did is, I found his name, and I'll say it's Bob again. I'm just gonna come Bob. And so I went after Bob. And so I went to his social media site, being in the news and stuff like that. He's obviously pretty heavily involved in technology. And so I found that he was actually traveling to France for a specific story out there at the time. And so I call Bob up, I spook my phone number up, and I look like I'm coming from Chase Cross Services. And the reason I know that he's going to have a card from Chase is because if you do some research on CNN or Turner, their provider for their corporate credit cards is Chase. And you can do that for Googling. So one, I already have established credibility, right? I'm coming from Chase's number because you can download apps that's with your phone number. That's the easiest part. But I call him like, hey Bob, this is so-and-so from Chase Cross Services. How are you doing today, sir? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing fine. Well, what can I do for you? And at this point, you're at a weird balance when it comes to human behavior. My big thing is human behavior, right? So Bob doesn't know yet if this is a hey, I'm trying to add additional service to you, I'm trying to sell you something, if this is like a person trying to sell you something. So you got to kind of overcome some apprehension originally. And so it is like, hey Bob, I noticed that you're traveling internationally. And based on his Twitter profile, I knew that it was. And he's like, yeah, I'm traveling internationally. I'm like, okay, well, I just wanted to go over some charges. We're seeing a lot of weird charges that we wanted to confirm with you. He's like, okay, that's fine. I'm like, so first of all, I know that you're in Paris. When are you returning? And I went through some standard questions, right? And what I'm doing at this point is I'm building rapport. Okay, I'm letting Bob know that I know about him and that I am who I say I am, but I'm giving him a sense that of easement that hey, I know a little bit about him, right? So in our mind, in our human minds, I'm shutting down that precautionary one. Now, if I would come out and Bob and say, hey Bob, I need you to give me your credit card and I'm going to go buy a bunch of stuff at the store, then of course his alarm's going to go up, right? But until I trip certain things in his mind, I'm okay. So he's like, yeah, I'm here until Friday, so-and-so, so can you put a mark on it if you see any charges in here? I'm like, okay, that's great, Bob. I just need to go over a couple things. And I can tell Bob starts to get a little bit annoyed because he's like, oh, I don't have time for this. I can tell he's in a public area. So he's probably in the middle of a shoot or something busy, right? But there's a lot of people around him, so I can hear it in the background. So at this point, I have to do two things. One is I either have to be quick, and I run the risk of getting caught. Or two, I can throw him off center. And throwing him off center is a very delicate balance because you can really upset somebody, or you can go the other way and you completely shut down. So I decided to try to throw him off center here. I'm like, hey Bob, so I'm just going to go over these things really quick with you, okay? Hey, did you go and buy $632 worth of, I basically said the store name, and I made it an adult store in Germany, like an adult dungeon store in Germany. And he's like, nope, didn't do that. That's not me at all. That's not me at all. And he starts stuttering a little bit, so I'm starting to throw him off center, right? He starts to get uncomfortable. and he's around people. So I'm like, okay, Bob, in order for me to be able to strike this up, I need you to repeat the name of the store and the amount that you did, because he's obviously in a public place, so he's repeating this horrible dungeon name. And so these are a bunch of other ones, and at this point he's concerned, right, because now he knows his credit card's been compromised. And so I say, okay, Bob, I can knock these off. I just need to do a couple things. One, can you validate the last four of your social? I see the first three is this. All right, I said, I'm sorry, I can validate the last four is this. Can you confirm the previous two or whatever, or previous five, sorry, of the social security number that you have? And he's like, yep, here it is. So he gives me a social security number. I'm like, well, can I get your full credit card number just so I can validate who you are? And Bob's like, yes, it's blah, 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 blah. Gives me his full credit card number. I'm like, yeah, sweet. You know? So Lori and I are high-fiving, you know, and then we start making fun of Bob. And Bob's like, what is going on? Yeah, it was a whole thing. But anyways. Poor Bob.
He's in for illegal activity.
Yeah.
In David's case, companies pay him to find out if employees are leaving the company vulnerable. He and his team show us how it's done. Step 1, spoof his number so it looks like he's calling from inside the company, and then call tech support.
Hello, you there? Hello?
Hi, this is Ken. How may I help you?
I was wondering if you could take a look at a website.
So real quick, a customer gave us permission to actually go and do this, which is great, right? You couldn't use their name if the name was never been removed from the segment. But what was interesting is when you go after help desk specifically, help desks are great because they're very helpful, right? That's their job, that's their role inside of the company. However, with help desks, there's certain things you cannot do, right? You cannot say, hey, I need you to change my password, because there's challenge questions associated with that, right? Hey, I need your date of birth, your employee ID, or something else. Someone's over there shaking their head like, oh, well.
We don't have a help desk, we have a helpless desk.
But help desks are a great source of information because they have privileges, they have rights. Those are things that I want access to as an attacker. And so what I did here is I knew that if I did certain things that wouldn't trigger their policy to trigger a password, I'd be okay. I could get information out of them and I can get them to do an action, because as an attacker, I need them to do an action, right, to do something for me. So I wanted to make sure I didn't trip any of that. So this is me calling help desk.
Can I get to you? It's for a big customer thing I'm working on for Monday, and I can't seem to get to the website from my computer.
Sure, what's the website? I'll see if I can get to it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the help. I mean, it could be a stupid thing. I'm really stuck with computers, but so it's www.survey. That's SURVEY -pro.com.
Yeah, I got a prompt to open. I just click open and I'm at the site now.
Here's what the IT guy doesn't realize. By clicking that link, he's just given David full access to his computer.
Whoa, okay, that's weird. I just hit it and it works. It seems like it's working fine now. Awesome. I don't know what you did, man, but I really appreciate the help.
Hey, no problem. That was easy.
That was it?
We're on the computer right now.
We were able to take over this guy's computer within, I would say, like, under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes, yeah. Under 2 minutes, took over his entire computer, and think of it as not just his computer, but it's pretty much a downfall of the entire company.
In this case, the company was paying David to hack them and see if their book.
So that was a good example of how easy and effective it is to go after individuals, right? And that's the scary part of where we're at. And so, you know, what in this specific case, when I attack the computer, and this happens in most cases, the initial intrusion point isn't detected. I don't know if you noticed or not, but most antivirus, things like that, don't detect much when it comes to what we do. We kind of laugh at antivirus. Like it's always a joke because we always send like screenshots like, hey, Symantec's running the process. Hey, Symantec, I'm going to migrate to you and just mess with you a little bit just for fun, you know? Like so, you know, so a lot of times I don't even know protective software's in there. And so that's a big problem because we don't know, and endpoints are usually our biggest area from a concern perspective of getting visibility into. And so what I'd like to do is show you and kind of unveil what I've been working on for the past 3.5 years, which is something that is a different spin on things. But I'm actually going to show you live attacks that are happening, and show you what you can do to detect it, or also what we can do to detect it as well. So the story behind Vision is when I was, you guys know me, I'm a little bit quirky in certain ways, but I come up with weird concepts. This one I think came up when I was in the middle of a shower. Taking a shower, and I think about computer code when I'm in the shower, so that's a weird thing. But I came up with a concept with Vision, which is more so around being able to detect more of the behavior and patterns of attackers and what's really out there. And so I started thinking about in my mind of, hey, if I was on the defense, how would I detect me? And so 3.5 years ago, we started writing the basic code and the concept behind Vision, and it's been evolving ever since to where we're at today. And today we actually have Vision deployed to, I think around 100,000 endpoints right now that are actively going and doing either pilots or they're actually our what we call alpha or beta customers, which has been fantastic. Right? When you have a a SOC and you have customers who are like, hey, we'll test your alpha code in our production system. We're like, hey, that's awesome, thank you so much. And then it works, you know, but it's been going very well. But what's awesome about it is what we started working on is where we're at today. And so today's actually our first day where we have version 2.1, which we finalized last week. And it's one of those things where I'm really proud to kind of show what we've done for the past 3.5 years. It's not just me. Like I said, I surround myself with people that are smarter than myself, and I have, you know, Charles, who's just a brain when it comes to the endpoint. He's our endpoint ninja. We have Aaron, who focuses on kernel development and everything you do inside a kernel. He originally came from a lot of the different areas around endpoint protection. We have Jimmy, who was our brainchild around how do you ingest all this data and how do you figure it out and what do you do and how do you say, well, this is bad behavior and this is normal behavior. And then we have Nathaniel, who just literally is just a UI person. So all these people come together to really where we're at today. And so just to give you a initial showing of it, so here's Vision. And it's the way that it works is it can be on-premise, off-premise, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. When we say cloud, it can be in our cloud, but it's housed at our own data center internally, so it's a private cloud. Believe me, we're very paranoid on security. We have the most paranoid network engineer you can ever possibly imagine. What we're seeing here is the different threats that we're tracking at a given time. And we use a few different ways. This is actually a valuable map versus a lot of the what we call QQ maps that are out there. But I wrote a tool called Artillery, and I've deployed Artillery across the board, so I think we're at 72 different locations now, looking for active attackers that are out there. And they report directly and centrally to us here, and so we get a good list of where those people are coming from and what type of techniques they're leveraging at a given time. And so these pod maps are different areas that Artillery is specifically tracking in different groups out there. You can see by the different heat maps the volume from those different areas, different locations that they're coming from, and ultimately what it is. Additionally, if you scroll down here, you can see, just based on statistics, this is a demo site I'm showing you here, but what our top alarms were, top hosts, some statistics based off of open alarms, events per second that we're seeing, live alarms, things that are happening at a given time. So you can see here we're having some different things. But what Vision is a very tiny and minimalistic endpoint agent that goes on servers, workstations, endpoints, etc. When I say it's minimum, we're talking about 25 to 40 megs of RAM and 0.01 CPU usage. And it's completely transparent in the background. You don't see it. It doesn't sit there and pop up warning things, and it doesn't prohibit normal operations. And our whole goal is you can literally and rapidly deploy Vision in under 2 minutes to your entire organization and get immediate detection of what's actually happening out there. So it's very quick, and we've built, believe me, when it comes to fail-safes, like if something goes wrong and your system's just really crazy, weird, and something we've never seen before, and Vision's freaking out, we actually trigger an alarm and we shut ourselves down so that we don't impact performance on that machine. So it's designed to be something that is not intrusive, it's not insane for you to actually handle. And it's very different for the industries moving in right now. If you look at a lot of the different tools out there like Tanium or Carbon Black or those type of ones out there, right? It's like sending an ion cannon to your network and you need a whole server infrastructure of data to be able to go through. Our goal was to say, hey, you probably don't have enough people on your team right now that know how I attack as an attacker or what's actually happening, or a new attack vector came out of DEF CON last week, or hey, the hacking team wrote this specific exploit and this is how they actually got into it. You probably don't have a team that just focuses on that. So instead, we're going to take that out of your equation and we're going to help you out with those type of detection capabilities in your environment. And so it allows you to immediately go. We use this for IR when we're doing incident response scenarios for organizations. We deploy across the entire company. Or we have our solution, which is the 24/7, 365, where we actively go and monitor, or your team can monitor too, doesn't make a difference. But what it is a way of being able to detect the types of attacks that I've talked about just a few minutes ago and how it's actually happening. I'll show you a couple examples of it. So, way it deploys is, by the way, we are releasing Linux and OS X support shortly. So right now it's just Windows, but we'll have Linux and OS X support this quarter, or next quarter, sorry. I'm a bit confused with the releasing. But, we do have the ability to support Linux and OS X, and it can be, again, on-premise or off-premise. What's great about it is the type of data that we send. Like on a 20,000 endpoint node, we send roughly around 500 megs to 600 megs a day, which is nothing. And like from a comparison of what we're sending for raw volume of data, so it's minimum data. We rely on the endpoint agents working together collectively to do a lot of that. So what I'm going to do is show you a little bit of an example. So here we have some alarms. I'm going to go ahead and clear these out, but one of the couple ones to mention is that what's really neat about how we attack as attackers is our behavior. Again, very abnormal, but we all follow the same principles of how we go after it. Each one of your machines that has Vision deployed turns itself into a honeypot in a multiple amount of different ways. One is it creates dynamic ports for low, medium, and high ranges. So if anybody's port scanning your network, you know exactly where they're coming from. But what's even cooler is that things like, one of the main methods that I use when I compromise a machine is I exploit it, right? And then I extract clear text passwords in memory, which is a known attack vector. The initial tool that came out was called Mimikatz. Well, it uses a specific technique to extract that information. We actually deploy honey tokens throughout your whole environment that look like fake Kerberos tokens of elevated accounts. As soon as someone goes to impersonate those, boom, we got you in 2 seconds. And no one should ever be touching those accounts in any way, shape, or form. So every machine becomes, a detection capability in your environment for the initial intrusion as well as the lateral movement in your environment. So that's a couple of examples here. What we also do is if we see your machines going out to command and control infrastructure, we notice that as well, and those are the blacklist connection attempts. So you can actually see command and control infrastructure where your machines are reaching out to different locations and things like that. But those are just a couple of examples here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this out real quick. I'm going to close these alarms. And so now we have no open alarms in Vision. I'm going to actually simulate an attack here. So I'm going to get in my machine. Got Bruce Lee up there. One thing I don't know how to do is type my password in. It's hard. There we go. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a quick attack. And I'm going to actually set up a phishing attack where it's going to take advantage of a method that we as attackers are leveraging now. If you don't know, most traditional ransomware, malware, commoditized things still use executables as kind of the main method, right? They drop an executable down and they infect. More of the persistent attackers are leveraging newer technologies like PowerShell. PowerShell is one of the most effective methods for not getting detected out there today. And that's what I use all the time. I use PowerShell as my main method of exploitation, as well as a few others. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch an attack, and what it's going to do is actually go and attack using PowerShell injection as the main method. So nothing that touches disk, nothing that should be picked up by anything that you have out there currently today, right? This is a method that I would use to compromise and infiltrate an organization today. Okay? So I'm going to go to the website attack vector. I'm going to use the HTA attack method, and I'm going to clone binary defense as an example. So what I'm doing is I'm cloning the binary defense website to make it look like it's that website, and then I would, usually entice somebody. I'm plugging in my command and control IP address. I'm just going to select the payload. Most attackers will use methods like HTTP, HTTPS as modes of communication, what we call RFC compliant traffic. The reason for that is they want to emulate legitimate traffic over your network, right? They're not going over non-standard ports anymore. They're leveraging your proxy servers. They're leveraging things they're using TCP and HTTPS as kind of main methods. Once I have everything set up here, I'm going to go to my virtual machine, which is a fully patched Windows 10 machine, right? Windows 10, one of the most secure operating systems that are out there, right? So I'm just going to go to this machine, and what I'm going to do, and normally I would set this up in a little bit way that was a little more believable, but I'm going to go ahead and run this application. Now, notice here it looks like I'm at binarydefense.com. If I set up my attack right, somebody's going to go ahead and click run. And I run, and notice I'm at binarydefense.com, which is secure, right? I'm legit. This is a good looking website. Just by when I hit run, there's a lot of ways of doing it without the pop-up. But as soon as I hit run, I compromise this machine. Okay, so this machine now I have full access to it. I can show you. So now I have access to this individual's machine with the users that they're actively running. And why that's important is now the method that I use to do this doesn't actually write files to the operating system. Okay, so I'm not writing files. I'm not dropping an executable. I'm doing what we call in-memory injection techniques. Vision. Go to my alarms. Notice here, it's going to take a second to load. You're slow. But we detect the PowerShell downgraded attack vector, and you can actually see the command that was being run on the operating system for the injection. Now, you might be like, well, hey, as an admin, I don't know whether or not that's legitimate or not. It could be. What you can do, what we do is we give a description of that first of all, the alarm type, but the description of what that is, the recommendation of doing some additional blog posts that we've done to give you some information of exactly what's happening. If I scroll down, this is the command that was run, we actually do the decoding automatically for you on a specific attack. So you can see the actual code that they were running at a given specific time to do your analysis on really quick, or we, if we're doing your SOC, being your SOC analyst, we can actively go and actually detect this. So this is what we're doing. We're spraying assembly code into memory through PowerShell to actually get this specific attack to occur. So you can see that happening real time as it occurs. So pretty neat stuff. Now, once I compromise a machine, I'm going to try to escalate my permissions. I'm going to try to grab an admin hash, right? You ever heard the technique pass the hash, right? Pass the hash is one of the most readily used methods. Now, what's interesting is most, what we used to use was a method called ps-exec, or as a method for pass the hash, right? But we've actually been moving to more what we call WMI. And WMI is much more harder to detect because it has what are called intrinsic and extrinsic events. Those are very difficult things to detect against when you're actually using it. Interesting enough, I'll show you an example of pass the hash. Well, if I was an attacker too, if I would just like, hold on a second. So let's just say I dump the hashes off of this, and I'll exit out of here real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a pass the hash technique really fast. Just take me a second, sorry. And I'll just type the password in. Super complex password. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me direct access to this computer, okay? And when I do this, this is a very abnormal behavior in your environment. Pass the hash should not be happening in your environment, okay? Same thing, by the way, one of the things with the honey tokens I talked about, extracting the clear text passwords in memory. Like if you see that, and we actually do a tree of multiple behavior patterns, but if you see the account that's fake for the honey tokens being used with the specific service that's being called, you know that someone's actually using that honey token with pass the hash, which is like a sure-fledged indicator that you've been owned like 6 ways to Sunday, right? Not good. That's not supposed to. Oh, sorry, wrong key. I think of that key in my Windows box. Which is. Alright. One semi-network. So now I authenticate using pass the hash. Gives me full access to this person's computer over the network. Again, the moving to different systems to gain access. Now I have access to this person's computer again, right? And then over here on our alarms, we see a pass the hash attempt. We also see during this specific period of time, I can actually, during this period of time when we actually do this attack, Metasploit is actually converted to PowerShell injection. But in order for pass the hash to actively work, it needs to actually create a service, call that service, and actually execute. So those triggers in time we trigger as a pretty big indicator that something's happening in the environment. So we can see that there's a pass the hash attempt. We also see that this service was created in that specific area, and we also see that the PowerShell injection technique was used in order to go and do it. So we go to pass the hash. It gives you a identification of what actually occurred, the host name that it originated from, any specific event, log IDs that you want to investigate or do your analysis for, the account that was used to do it, and the remote attacking IP address that it came from. So if I'm doing pass the hash from a remote system, I want to know exactly which system is actually doing that in your environment, and that's exactly where it comes from. We also have the ability to detect multiple source and destination failures. So for example, when I get a hash, I'm going to try to spray that hash across the network to see where it's valid at. So if I see the same source IP address is coming from one host to multiple others, and there's a lot of failures going on, that's another clear indicator that something's wrong. So there's multiple ways of looking at those type of patterns as it's happening in real time. But if you want to learn more about pass the hash, again, that's in our posts here that you actively see on a given basis. So ability to look at a lot of those. But let's just say this is a false positive. For some reason using pass the hash in your environment is legitimate. Whatever. That's fine. You can just create a whitelist. And whitelists are super simple to add, so notice it automatically populates the pass the hash alarm. You just add whatever field you want to whitelist and who you want it to come from. Like for example, some tools like Nessus, for example, will simulate things that are like pass the hash. So I can say, okay, well I'm coming from this source IP address, which is Nessus, my Nessus server, and it's using this specific account, then don't trigger an alarm, I'm okay. And so you do have the ability to do granular exceptions when it's coming into here. So a couple of good ones. Additionally, did anybody see the bypass recently for AppLocker? There's a bypass that came out for AppLocker that allows you to circumvent. You use a specific file type called, was it SDA? SDA or?
I didn't think it mattered.
Well, the SDA file type does matter because you have to import that and download the XML format content into the file system itself. So the file type does actually, when we say file type, not the extension, but the content of the file, sorry. So uses specific, anyways, it's a way of circumventing application whitelisting. So one of the main methods that we do to do that as well is as an attacker, I might go to, or I might use an automatic download, or I might write something out to a file. So, let's do pro.hta or whatever, or .exe, whatever you want to do. One thing that Vision will automatically pick up on is when specific file types that are particularly interesting in nature happen, will automatically go and right through there. And so I'm waiting for that to pop up. So you can see it'll actually drop the specific file types that's actually happening over there, where it came from. What's also nice is it'll actually grab the MD5 of that file, and it'll automatically allow you to submit to things like virus total and those other ones if you want to take a quick analysis and look at it real time. So it's a lot of ways of being able to gain visibility. There's a lot of features that I didn't even cover. Like if I decided I wanted to add a local admin, or domain admins, things like that. Oh, sorry, that's so it can maintain access to the environment. It will detect those changes as they happen in real time. Domain admin accounts real time. These are the cool parts, right? These are the behavior stuff that you want to look for, right? But this isn't even the coolest part. The coolest one within Vision is what we've built into it around lateral movement. And so, what if I'm using a technique that isn't pass the hash or PowerShell injection or tokens that are in memory? I'm using a technique that is never been discovered before in my life, but so what I want to look for more is that pattern behavior. And so what we actually do is every machine that has Vision logged into it, it actively looks at that person's pattern behavior for regular day-to-day use. And does a normal user, like does Bob in sales, ever need to be connecting to other machines, especially folks that are like IT folks like John that's in IT? That should never happen, right? There should never be direct communications and paths to other systems that I would leverage, or server to server to server to server, right? And so we built the ability to actually detect lateral movement without patterns of specific types of indicators of compromise to look for that. So if I compromise one system, I actually have the ability to go from one system to the next system to the next system. That'll trigger a lateral movement alert. And so you can actually see the lateral movement happening in your environment even if you don't actually go and detect it. So that's one of our real cool features that we've been fine-tuning over the past 3 years on getting that perfected and made. It's getting better every day. The lateral movement piece for us is one of the biggest ones, and that's how we've actually stopped a large percentage of the indicators of compromise that most places don't, because of that specific type of behavior recognition. Someone going from this machine to this machine to this machine, or an account that gets compromised that is now moved from this machine to this machine to this machine. So it's real effective in those different types of things. But you have the ability to look at all the assets, what code base you're running, deactivate an asset if you want to, what version of operating system we're running. We support Windows 7 and above. We run 64 and 32-bit different platforms. You can deactivate an asset. We only require one port. All of our communications are all done over TLS. TLS 1.2, as soon as 1.3 is fully vetted, we'll have it over 1.3. But that's how we operate. It's all over us on TLS, it's all over encrypted communications, and that's all we use to operate. Now what's really cool about the framework behind it is that the way that we ingest information, think of it as what we call data streams, okay? And so you have a lot of information being sent to the server itself that handles this. And these data streams, think of it as a square and a circle and a triangle or whatnot. And when you take a square and a circle and triangle and you put those patterns together, that equals this, right? What happens if a new indicator comes out tomorrow? And we do rapid release cycles, so usually once a month we have new IOC type pushes that happen to this. But what's interesting is when a new indicator happens, we can apply that pattern to your existing data stream, and it'll look back historically at all of your other data to say whether or not it's happened before in the past. And so, you have the ability to real time see what's happening in your environment, when it happens, how it's happening, all that good stuff. So you can see here escalation of privileges. I did earlier, the account that was added, what group, there's a domain name, you can see those. But we have the ability to apply that real time to all your different environments. So it works really well. Live view, when events are coming in, if I were to trigger another alarm, let's just exit out. You can see the information come in real time as it happens. And so you can look at what's actually happening, different areas that are occurring, all those different stuff. I'm going to a banned artillery feed. See, like this one. Give that a second, it'll pop up. You see all that happening live, real time. And so we can actually drill down into these events, see exactly what's being sent back from the send. We use JSON formatting. We have the ability to export to SIM infrastructure, so if you want to do syslog to your SIM infrastructure, no problem all there. We can also look at live alarms that are specifically happening at a given time as well. So it allows you to basically get real-time visibility into your environment that's happening. So pretty neat. The way that we work is pretty kind of like the, oh, did you shoot through? Yeah. Connection port, there it is, yeah. What's nice about the Vision product line is we take kind of the concept of Apple for release cycles, right? We have minor revs, and the way minor revs work is that you usually once a month you have different indicators of compromise, new feature sets, UI enhancements that happen. So we're very agile on that side. We have alpha, beta, and gamma customers, or GA customers that we focus through. What's nice is that we won't allow you to deploy a new agent until you're running the latest server build. So it's all automated. You go to the update site, you hit, I want to update my server, it updates. And it allows you, in that little thing, it has 2 download links to MSI files, both 64 and 32-bit. Say you want to test them out in your environment first before you actually go and deploy, you can. Or you can just hit deploy, and as soon as the agent checks in next time, usually a 20-minute interval, it'll automatically deploy it to your environment, restart the service, everything else is good, no reboots needed, none of that stuff. So it's completely seamless in the background from an installation perspective. It basically handles all those different areas. So that's what we've been working on for the past 3.5 years that we've kind of unveiled today, which is something that I'm super proud of from a Vision perspective. So, kind of cool. Anybody have any questions?
How is that deployed? Is it going to be deployed on each endpoint then, at the client side? So when you engage with a client, you're loading this on each machine.
That's right. Yeah, or server, or workstation.
Server,
Yep.
and it could be on Mac or PC.
Yep. And then it allows you to get the visibility. Now, you have the ability to have, like, literally, if you decide you want to do with a Vision server, for us to stand up a Vision server takes about 5 minutes, right? For us to stand up the server and spin it up and have it pre-configured and ready to go for you. If you deploy, it takes another few minutes to deploy it to your environment, and then you're automatically getting feedback in our infrastructure. That's off-premise, more cloud-centric, right?
Yeah.
If I take my laptop off the network and I'm at a Starbucks, I still get the same detection as I would if I'm on the network, away from in a corporate environment. So I get it both on your network and off the network as well. So it works.
That's the value right there, because if you got road warriors and they're out, you got to come in on your PM.
Yeah.
So what port did you have to open? Do you have to open some port in firewall?
Web browsing, 443.
Got it.
Yeah. And HTTPS.
Does it stop or block any of it? It does report it. Does it just let it go through?
Correct. Yeah, we are purely a detective control in the environment, and that's a good point. The concept behind BDS is that companies have a very small window to react to a specific incident. Right? You talk about that hours versus days, right? We decided to be extremely and the best at detecting attacks as they happen in real time, so that you can say, okay, I got a breach today. I need to respond and figure out how that actually occurred and remove that from your environment. So it gives you the immediate and real-time visibility you need to stop that threat in real time as it happens. Now, we are working on what we call containment mode. So in the event that machine becomes compromised, you can hit contain and it moves it off of the network for you, so that you can then go and do it. That's a later release, but that's definitely in that times. The one cool thing about us too is that we are very agile. A customer asked us, hey, is there any way we can get a CSV export for Excel for the assets? We're like, sure, I had it done in like 3 hours. It's like, so we are very quick at what we do, obviously testing and all that good stuff. But it's good. Any other questions?
So, is it injecting itself into every running process on the system then to detect like active attacks?
No, it does not need to inject itself into every process. There's a number of ways that we do detection, intrinsic and extrinsic living my events, operating system API hooks, as well as kernel monitoring. So we don't need to, since we're running in ring 0, we don't have to worry about injecting into every process.
Okay, very good.
I noticed there were multiple detections per single action instead of Metasploit.
It's not just Metasploit,
right?
Yeah.
Like I passed the hash, created 7 or 8. Are there groupings that you can do inside of the app to say this was caused by one attack or one thing versus just looking at the timestamps.
Yeah, so the individual techniques that you see typically are things that we would learn. So you don't necessarily have the ability to group them together, but you can break them out into specific categories. So if you just want to look at past the hash or all those different areas, you have the ability to be granular with that, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions?
Dave, how does it handle like the non-PowerShell publishers?
Great. Yeah. So like PBA, BDS type scripts that are executed, executable binary droppers, persistence hooks, into different portions of the registry, areas, extraction of SAM databases, LSAS injection, pretty good at all those. Yeah. Any other questions?
How does it handle non-malicious PowerShell, just functionality?
Most of the stuff, like, so as an attacker, I'm typically not going to remove execution restriction policies. But if you are, that could be a legitimate business process. Those are things that you would have to wipe the stand, right? What we find is that we try to minimize as much false positives without reducing the detection capabilities. And the PowerShell one, we've only had, and again, this is around 100,000 endpoints. It's really only triggered when it's been malicious activity. So that one's very good. The more the noisy ones are like the executable binary droppers. And our next release in 2.2 incorporates digital signature signing checks. So it'll actually grab the executable, it'll disassemble the digital signature on it, and then look at that to see what's actually happening and whether or not it's a legitimate certificate.
Yeah.
And if that occurs, then it won't actually trigger an alarm based off of that. Off of known ones like Microsoft, Apple, not anybody can co-sign an executable that you want to do. Service creations are usually not as noisy because we baseline a lot of the majority ones that are out there, so it's usually not pretty noisy at all. Most of the time when you're getting a hit is something legitimate. Yeah. It's getting better each day, for sure. Any other questions?
Looks like Congo, Siberia, and Greenland are the safest places on Earth.
Well, it's funny, when we were monitoring the attacks, you look at the Stanley Cup finals from last year, right? Canada, we'd see like, maybe like 100 or so attackers out of there. During the Stanley Cups, there was 0 out of Canada. 0 attacks. 0. None. Not one. It was
See a lot more
amazing.
this year though, because I think for the first time in like foreseeable history, there's no Canadian teams in the NHL.
Wow. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So it was amazing to see some of those stats, but yeah, definitely something that we keep an eye on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you see, given the fact that there are VPN services out there, both commercial and I suppose otherwise, attackers trying to hide their points of origin? And is this an increasing phenomenon, and is it messing with your point of origin data?
It's a good question. I definitely see attackers hiding where they're coming from. Absolutely, launching attacks from second stage type we call platforms, leapfrog type locations. So to compromise somebody in the United States and use that as a method to compromise another areas. And we did the same thing, when we say we, not us, but the United States does the same thing. They'll use, compromised servers in Russia to launch attacks from Russia, China, and China. But the piece, the command and control infrastructure piece, is just one method of a lot of the other methods. And we're not really focused on the signature stuff that you would traditionally see from like antivirus, for example. We're more concerned about the behavior and what people are exhibiting that are concerned. So if I use a VPN, like a VPN to hide where I'm coming from, and from there I start launching my attacks, well, we're going to see it because it's abnormal behavior in your environment. It's not like we're looking for that specific IP address in order for you to connect to in order to trigger our alarm. So it's very different from a pattern perspective, right? And so yes, I agree with you 100%. That there are definitely ways that they're going around different IPs, but that's not what we're looking for as far as the attacks.
Do you have ways to detect whether it is coming from a sovereign state that may not be friendly to us versus a private?
Yes, so that's where we talk about our threat intelligence piece that comes into that, right? And that's where that artillery ban list piece comes from. We're actually tracking those specific groups and what they're doing. We see a large concentration coming from specific source IP addresses. We know that they're coming from like more state-sponsored type activities or actors that are out there versus commoditized hackers that are out there. Absolutely.
I think that's maybe what he was also asking about was with the threat intelligence, you know, the heat map that you have up there. If how sure you are that those are actually coming from those sources as opposed to piggybacking.
Yeah, and our team, like our TI team, is directly integrated into like what IP addresses and what DNS names are being leveraged and what infrastructure that they're using from a command and control perspective that are part of that, and it's directly tied into the Vision product as well. So we see, you know, specific attack and it says, hey, blacklist IP, it'll actually have a little write-up of you for you to show you what's actually happening and link information about those specific targets. So definitely gives you an understanding of what's actually happening out there.
Custom threat intelligence feeds.
Yep.
Capable.
Yep.
Okay, like critical stack, things like that.
Integration into those. No, we can add it. Absolutely. That's actually really easy for us to do. So it's just a matter of, in fact, I already know how to write it. I can write it tonight.
So, you've said repeatedly that antivirus is worthless, or paraphrase at least. And that this is a much better way of detecting attacks. So, what do you think about the regulations where they are requiring antivirus to be on there? Is this a replacement for that type of software, or should this be used in conjunction with that software to
Great question.
kind of meet that regulation?
Great question. So, you know, most regulations take a while to update, but you know, like PCI, for example, specifically states that they have to have, you know, some sort of protection around, especially around antivirus. So that, we don't market this as a replacement for antivirus, whatever prevention software you're leveraging in your environment. It's an enhancement on top of it. We don't conflict with any antivirus software that's out there. We're not, you know, competing for specific areas or places on the stack in order to get a hold of. So, you know, we've been integrated with Sophos and Symantec and McAfee and everybody else that's out there. So it's not necessarily a replacement for antivirus. It's an enhancement for visibility to where most companies don't have good visibility into their endpoints right now. Can I answer your question?
Yes.
You mean, take care. Any questions?
Are there plans to tie into like APIs and application layer firewalls like at Palo Alto so you can automate some of the response? Like if there's an event generated on the endpoint, it can automatically block it in the IPS signature?
There is.
Yeah.
There is, absolutely.
Okay. Any details?
Well, so there's a couple of ways of looking at containment mode, which is one, right? You know, being able to move it and isolate it off of the network, so you can still access it from a incident response perspective, but not completely boot it off of the network from a response. So we do have integration we're going into that right now. That's one of our protection modes that we have. We're also looking at a lot of other things that I can't talk about at the moment, but it does help with protective type controls to touch. A replacement.
Is that it? All right. Oh wait, one more.
One more. Around that, what's the time frame around the
It's, we have our milestones, and so 2.2 is supposed to be out next month. 2.3 is when we start to incorporate Linux and OS X, and 2.4 is when it continues. So 4 months. Yeah. It's in the near future. All right. Well, yeah, that was it. Thanks everybody. Really.
Thank you very much, Dave. Concludes kind of the formal portion of the day, but certainly does not conclude the day. So we're going to actually adjourn out here to just kind of the meeting area out here. I think both rooms will kind of continue to be open. Please, we've got some cocktails, soft drinks, appetizers out here. So please feel free to stay if you have any additional questions. All of the presenters from today are here. So if you have new questions or questions you didn't quite get to, please feel free to grab them and talk to them, speak with them over the course of while we're out here. And once again, just on behalf of all of us at BDS, our partners, the co-sponsors, we really appreciate you guys joining us today. The thing that makes an event like this successful is the audience and the people who participate. So we really appreciate the active participation. Those of you who made the trip here, we really are very appreciative. We have !@binary defense up. So if you didn't get to something today, if you're driving home, you have an additional question come up, don't hesitate just to launch the question out to that site, and we'll make sure that we respond very swiftly. And if you have any additional needs, any additional information needs, see me, see Ryan, whoever you might want to see, and we'll be